But we're talking about sloth, and when we think of sloth, who here seen Zootopia? You know Sid the Sloth who works at the DMV? That's not the type of sloth we're talking about. Like, if you're here, like, oh, we're going to talk about the adorable, slow-moving animals. Did you know that sloths are, like, super dumb, too? Like, sometimes they'll, like, grab onto their own limbs because they think it's a branch and they fall and die. That's crazy. Imagine being that dumb and lazy. That'd be awful. Like, that's not what we're talking about. Have you ever seen baby sloths? They're weird. Anyway, I said we're not talking about it. We're not going to talk about it. But we are talking about the 7 deadly sins of sloth. We're talking about sloth. And to be completely honest, sloth is probably the least exciting of all of the deadly sins. It doesn't actually seem that deadly. Like, there's no sloth that could beat me in a fight. Like, they're small. I'm kidding. I'm not talking about the animal. But it's really not that exciting. What do I mean by that? If you look at the sins like lust, wrath, greed, they're all pretty involved. They are things that we can easily be pinpointed and things that stand out. Where sloth is like, I just didn't really want to. I didn't want to do the research, so I didn't find examples of sloth. No, that's not what I'm saying. But essentially, it's easy to look at all these other sins, and if you follow them to the nth degree, it's easy to see where death and destruction could come, right? Like wrath, you follow that and you get destruction. Physical violence comes from that. Anger, lust, right? Lust goes into adultery and all of those sexual sins. Greed comes into hoarding things and stealing things, right? Envy, the same thing. It just creates all these dangerous things. Gluttony leads to a bunch of problems in your physical body and in other things, and we'll talk about that in a few weeks. But sloth is just like, kind of being lazy, just kind of having a me day. Just kind of doing nothing. In some ways, it's apathy. In some ways, it's not caring about what's going on. But before we go far into what sloth leads to and what it looks like, let's talk about what really, really is. Proverbs 19:15 says this: laziness brings on a deep sleep, and the shiftless go hungry. So it's saying laziness brings on a deep sleep, and those that don't move, those that don't do something, go hungry. You guys know the parable of the ant and the grasshopper? Everyone, you guys see that in school? There's this old story of there's an ant and a grasshopper, and the grasshopper is just playing around all summer, and the ant's doing work, and eventually it gets to wintertime, and the grasshopper doesn't have anything, and the ant does because the ant worked. That's essentially what this is saying. It's that the laziness brings a deep sleep, they don't know anything, and then the shiftless, the grasshopper that didn't do the work, they go hungry, they've got nothing. The word used in Proverbs 19:15 for slothfulness means laziness, sluggishness, or indolence, which is the avoidance of activity or exertion. The slothful person is one who not only doesn't want to work, but one who avoids it as well. This person may even go out of their way to avoid doing work. So again, it's not just laziness, it's actually avoiding effort. It's actually putting effort in to not put in effort. Which is silly if you think about it, but anyone that's worked a 9 to 5 or anyone that's working, the amount of effort sometimes we put in to avoid doing the work that we should do so we could just do it later, it's terrible. Like, have you ever put in so much effort to not study? Like, if you ever, like, for me, like, if you want my house to be clean, give me, like, when I was in school, if I had to study, no. Because then I'm going to clean my house. Because I would rather, like, I picked the lesser of two evils in my mind, right? There's the thing I should be doing, but I'm going to fill my time with everything else. Or if I have to clean my house, like, no, sorry, I got to go mow the lawn now. Because it's easier. Right? We can put effort into these things. And can I be super honest and blunt here? We all do this. We've all been lazy. We've all had days where we've avoided work. We've all binged on something that required little to no effort. Netflix is great for that. Right? Like, I'd be lying if I said I haven't watched an entire series of shows in one sitting. Right? I think it was Stranger Things, season 1 or season 2. It came out before Ellie was born. I had a weekend off, and Kristen and I were just watching it, and we're a young married couple, no kids. We're like, well, we got nothing to do. We might as well just watch the whole thing. So we watched the whole thing. It was fun, but was it healthy? Probably not. So it's easy to ask, though, because we've all done these things. We've all found ourselves in situations where we've indulged this. What's the big deal? What is the issue with laziness? Don't I deserve a day off? I work hard. Shouldn't I be able to take time off? The first thing to realize when dealing with sloth is that it's not only what sloth is, but it's also what sloth isn't. Right? Because sloth isn't just sitting down. Sloth isn't just not doing work. Sloth is the attitude and the avoidance of effort at all costs. Sloth is a lifestyle that persists beyond just your one single day. Sloth isn't recovery. That's an important thing to realize. Sloth also isn't rest. Sloth isn't just taking a me day every once in a while. Like, the truth is, a lot of people can, like, the enemy can convince you that you're being slothful if you take a break. Did you know that some people need a break? Sometimes it's really important to have a break. I'm going to pick on Nicole because she's a PhD student and she does a lot of work. And a lot of our conversations, how many times have we met and I've been like, Nicole, what have you done for yourself in the last month? And she's like, I listened to music on the way here and it was nice. I listened to worship music, right? Sometimes the enemy can actually attack us and say, if you're not working all the time, you're being slothful. That is not true. God rested. Like, not just Jesus the human, like God, the creator of the heavens and earth, rested on the seventh day. Was it because he was tired? No, he's God. He doesn't get tired. But he knows that we're going to model ourselves after him. So even the creator of the universe that we model every good virtue off of took a rest day. Rest is important. Sloth is not rest. Resting is not sinful. But we need to rest properly. I think my favorite way to frame sloth is like this. Most deadly sins will lead you towards death. Right? We talked about that a little bit before, right? Wrath, lust, all these things. But sloth will keep you from life. Sloth will actually hold you back from what you're supposed to be. James 4:17 says this, if anyone then knows the good that they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is sin for them. Sloth keeps us from doing the things in our lives that we should be doing. And that in itself makes it sinful. Right? It's not sinful to rest, but if it gets to the point where your rest is now laziness and it's stopping you from being the person that you're called to be, it's preventing you from moving forward in these things, then that is sinful. Like I said, sloth keeps us from doing what we need to do, which once again we see sin as a perversion of a virtue. As I said before, rest is godly, and as much as a sloth might look like rest at first glance, and it might, in the same way that lust might look like love, and anger and wrath might look like justice sometimes, they are perversions of one another. And they're actually the opposite, because rest is actually necessary to do what you need to do, whereas sloth will keep you from that. I'm going to get some grief from this from Bridget because we talked about it today in staff meeting. But I've been pretty good at not using any sports or fitness analogies of this entire series. I used to use a fitness analogy every single week, but I'm going to now because we're preaching on sloth and it makes sense. But one of my favorite hobbies is exercising and working out. Doesn't matter how strong you are, doesn't matter how good of shape you are in, you need to take rest days. And even if you're on a bunch of drugs that will keep you from taking rest days, that will catch up for you and you will just die sooner and you'll get your rest days in when you're dead. You need to don't do steroids. It's bad, Nathan. I'm kidding. He's on to me. No, I'm kidding. For those of you listening at home, Nathan's a very muscular human. I'm kidding. You need to take a rest day. In fact, if you do not rest, you will hurt yourself. If you train the same every single day, you will hurt yourself. I have injured my back several times because I did not rest enough, because I was overloading my body. You see people get burnt out all the time where they need to rest and they do not. And so as a result of that, they can no longer do what they need to do. Rest is necessary. In fact, if you look at, if you're building strength training, if you're doing bodybuilding, anything like that, your body actually grows when you rest. Right? The number one thing, if you're looking at someone training in strength, and they're like, well, I can't put on muscle, one of the first things the trainer will ask you is, how often are you sleeping? What does your sleep look like? Because your body grows more when you're sleeping. That's why little kids, like the age of my daughter, will my legs hurt while I'm sleeping. Yeah, because you're growing while you're sleeping. You grow during rest. Rest is necessary to achieve the goals and for you to become the person you're supposed to be. However, sloth takes that necessary good and perverts it into preventing you from ever becoming it. They're not the same thing. So rest is something that we do in order to achieve something, where sloth keeps us from achieving anything or something specific. So we know it is, but is it really a big deal? There's an epic quote from a book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan. It says this: the definition of hell is your last day on earth. The person you became meets the person that you could have become. Have you guys heard that quote before? The definition of hell is on your last day of earth. The person that you became meets the person that you could have become. That, to me, sometimes is like, that's heavy. It's that idea of being tormented of all the good decisions you could have made that were in your power to do. All the good things, right? You see that, it's like, I could have been so much better. And I'm not trying to attack anyone, but the truth is, that idea, there's merit there. Because sloth is the thing that can keep us from becoming the person that we could have become. Who here's heard of the 10,000 hour rule? Do you guys know that rule? Anyone want to tell me what it is? Cameron's nodding his head.
Practice the skill for 10,000 hours.
Become a master of it, yeah. How many hours have you played the bass for, stand-up bass? Are you at 10,000 yet?
I don't know.
You're pretty close. You're pretty close. You're pretty good. He's very good. He's very good. And for those that don't know, the 10,000-hour rule is essentially this rule where it says, if you practice something, if you do something for 10,000 hours, you will become a master at it. You will become great at it. That's pretty cool. But at the same time, that's a lot of time. 10,000 hours is a huge amount of time, and it's actually daunting. And I think sometimes we can look at tasks like that, and we can be terrified. Let me break it down for you. Essentially, that means it would 2 hours and 45 minutes of doing something every day for 10 years to master it. That's a lot of time. And if you love something, that's awesome. Right? Like I look at great musicians like, Simon, how many hours have you spent on music? Please tell me it's more than I have, because you're way better than me. Simon's so good. But it's a lot of work, and I feel like in our Instagram-obsessed culture and all these things, all we see is people's highlights. We see everything. We see all the celebration of what all the masters can do and all these incredible things. And then we look at it and we think, 10,000 hours is a lot. I'm not even going to try. I'm never going to be the best guitarist in the world. Like, man, like I love playing guitar. I love like really technical music. I like to try to play it. But there is nothing more discouraging than one of my friends sending me a video clip of an 11-year-old doing something that I will never be able to do. And this is something that I've like literally like I'm probably past the 10,000 hour mark now. But literally I'll watch an 11-year-old like, I just picked this guitar up yesterday. Look what I can do. And I'm like, wow, you've seen the 11-year-olds. There's a lot of them. Anyone on it's crazy. Literally happened this week, and I'm like, I'm gonna body check that kid in the boards and see how good it is then. But there's also a truth that we sometimes can ignore because we look at this culture where we're obsessed with celebrating mastery of everything, and then that paralyzes us and it stops us from trying, it stops us from moving forward, and then we end up doing nothing. But the truth is, you do not need to master something in order to gain value from it. You don't need to master something in order to bring benefit from it. You don't need to master something to even have other people enjoy it. You know what I love? I love when my in-laws ever hear me play guitar. Because my father-in-law might not be the world's best musician, and he doesn't understand a lot of things that I understand. But he'll watch he'll share, if I post a video on YouTube, he'll share, and literally they were down, he's like, oh, Ben, you should go on Canada's Got Talent. You should totally do that. And I'm thinking dude, you have no idea. I'm nowhere near that good. But he has no idea, and he enjoys it. The truth is, you don't need to be a master to bless the world with things. But the idea of sloth and laziness can actually stop us from engaging things that other people can benefit from or that we can benefit from. And I'm just talking in a practical sense. I haven't even gotten to the spiritual side yet. But it can actually prevent us from doing that. And as a result, we get stuck. Truthfully, I believe that the 10,000-hour rule can be one of the most deflating principles of self-improvement. And I'm big into self-improvement. I talk about it a lot. But what can happen is it can seem so large that we don't do anything, and as a result we sit and we fill our time with nothing, and we don't achieve anything because we've bought the lie that if we aren't going to be perfect at something, we shouldn't even try. And man, I'm really preaching to myself this time. There's another principle. It's newer. It's come on. Have you ever heard of the 20-hour rule? It's a lot less than 10,000 hours, sorry. The 20-hour rule, it's because the 20-hour rule has been popularized by the author Josh Kaufman in his book, The First 20 Hours, called How to Learn Anything Fast. Essentially, what the principle says is that 20 hours of deliberate, focused practice is what is needed to make you necessarily competent at a new skill. I'm sounding like I'm giving a TED Talk right now. Trust me, I'm bringing it together at some point. But it's saying 20 hours of deliberate practice is to become competent, not a master. And there is a huge difference between competency and mastery, but to someone on the outside or to get enjoyment from something, it really doesn't always matter. In fact, sometimes I think the more that you enjoy something, the harder it is. I'm going to pick on Cam again because he's very good at his instrument, at the stand-up bass. It's probably harder for you to be impressed by that now because you know how difficult it is. And sometimes if you're practicing, it might be difficult just to play for fun because maybe you don't have it. You're used to being at 110%. So if you're 104, you can be frustrated with yourself. Right? I can find this when it comes with your training in the gym or if you're working on music and stuff and you can't hit the numbers that you can normally hit, you can get frustrated with yourself and you can lose joy. But when you're in that first discovery of a new thing or a new hobby or a new idea or a new venture, it's exciting, it's fun. But our sloth can hold us back from engaging those things. But that 20-hour rule is saying within 20 hours, you can actually be good at something. Here's what that is. 20 hours, that is less than 3 hours a day for a week, or that's like 40 minutes a day for a month. Some of us spend more time deciding what to watch on Netflix. Not even watching, but deciding what to watch than that. And then we just watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine or The Office for the 15th time.
Classic.
Am I wrong? Right? Or like Seinfeld's on at my house right now, and I don't know why, but it's like, what's the deal with Netflix? Anyway. Why am I saying this? Because, guys, it's actually important for us to understand that with the time that we have, we can actually invest that in something. And what sloth is, it prevents us from investing the time that God has given us. And it actually is a spiritual principle. Whether we realize it or not, it is a spiritual principle. And there's all these barriers that stand in the way, but really what's happening is it's the idea of laziness and sloth that's speaking to us saying, hey, no, don't do that. You'll never be the best. Oh, it's easier if you just do this. And did you know that you can actually be slothful and busy as well? I kind of mentioned this before. I'm talking about avoiding doing chores. Sometimes we fill our schedule with things and we believe the lie that we don't have time, but we actually just fill our schedule with meaningless things and we think that we're busy, we think that we're burnt out, but we're actually just too lazy to make radical changes in our lives and our schedule because the busyness and the routine that we're caught in seems to work for us. That's a hard thing to do. But you can be busy and slothful at the same time because it's not all just sitting on the couch eating Cheetos, not watching Netflix. Is that a lot of time? Maybe. But sloth, again, is anything that's keeping you away from effort. So if you've got a busy schedule that you've made busy because you know that it's easy and you can coast by and you've survived in a burnt out spot, you could be exhausted, but you could still be slothful. Isn't that a weird dichotomy? Because you haven't learned to rest. So when I wanted to get more serious into fitness and working on things, one of the decisions I need to find time to do this. Well, I can't go in the evening. I can't go something because I want to spend time with my wife, got to work, I spend time with my kids. So especially during COVID, I had to book time at the gym, and the only time that I could book to go to the gym, this is before I did the home gym thing, was 5 a.m. It's the only time that worked for me in my schedule. So I got up every single day at 5 a.m, and I had an alarm set on my phone for when the booking slots, because in Ontario only 10 people could be at the gym at a time, and if I didn't get that booking slot instantly, it would be gone. So I would book it at 5 o'clock in the morning every single day. And I'm going to tell you things. The most important thing that happened for me in that time period was not growing and getting in better shape. Yeah, that helped. But I think the most important thing that helped me there, it realized that instead of I was building muscle, but I was also killing laziness. I was putting effort into something, and I was putting effort into defeating the idea of sloth. And you want to know the crazy thing about that is? When I started doing that, the other things in my life started to improve. I talk you should do the important things first. I think that's important in your day. Talk to anyone that gets up early that goes for runs, and those people are insane. I can't do it. And I'm not doing the early workouts right now. I'm working on it, but the new kids kind of mess with my schedule, but I'm trying to get back to it. But the truth is, if you wake up and you defeat laziness in a lot of things, whether it's going to the gym or reading your Bible or doing something that is intentional in the morning to get yourself going, studies have proven across the board that it makes a massive difference in people's productivity. Why? Because discipline begets discipline. If you teach yourself to defeat the sloth and laziness in one area of your life, that will carry over. I can promise you, when I've been more diligent in working out, or when I've been more diligent in reading my Bible, when I've been more diligent in practicing music, whatever it is that we're doing, those things carry over into our spiritual lives. They carry over into our everyday lives because they're spiritual principles. It's saying that my flesh is not the most important thing to me, that there's something better out there, and I'm going to conquer that. We need to find ways to kill laziness in our lives. I dare you to spend a month and be hey, I'm going to kill laziness. I'm going to rest when I need to, but if I feel myself being lazy, I'm going to do something. And I'm not trying to sound like a David Goggins TED Talk or something like that now, or a clip from Joe Rogan's show when someone's like, oh, you got to wake up and you got to eat elk meat and bench press 500 pounds every day. If you want to do that, cool, that's awesome. Show me the video because that'd be very impressive. But at the same time, man, what's the downside of defeating laziness and feeling like a whole person? And not looking back every day being oh, there's so much today that I didn't get done. And will you have days where you fail? Yeah, that's going to happen. But if we can learn to do that, it's a deeply spiritual principle. I know it sounds like just good advice, but is there anything biblical about this? And really there is. This is one of my favorite stories to tell in the Bible. And it's one that a lot of people, especially this day and age, don't like. because it's got some principles. Like, there's a lot of people that would say, well, Jesus was this type of political ideology. Like, oh, Jesus was a socialist. No, Jesus was this. Like, no, Jesus was Jesus. He didn't subscribe to any political view. He transcends all of that. And then this kind of flies in the face of all that. And people get uncomfortable with this. But this is Matthew 10, 14, 30. And this is the parable of the bags of gold. And this is the story. Jesus says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. One, he gave 5 bags of gold, to the other 2 bags, and another 1 bag, each according to his ability. So these people were not equal. He gave them different sums of money. That's important. The man who received 5 bags of gold went at once to put his money for work and gained 5 more bags. So also one with the 2 bags of gold gained 2 more bags. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled the accounts with them. The man who has received 5 bags brought the other 5 and said, Master, you have entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold said, Master, you entrust me with 2 bags of gold. See, I've gained 2 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold said, Master, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. I was afraid, so I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belonged to you. So again, he didn't bring back anything. He didn't lose it, but he didn't do anything with it. It's important. His master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. Well, then you should have put money on a deposit with the banker so that when I've returned, I would have received it with interest. So at least you should have put it in the bank to get some interest on it. So take the bag of gold and gave it to him and give it to the man who has 10 bags. So he gives it to the person that made more money. For whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, what they have will be taken from them. That's an uncomfortable thing to hear from the Bible. That's not what we usually think. And throw that worthless servant outside to the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. There's a lot to unpack on this one. That's a heavy, heavy story. But this is Jesus talking about the kingdom of heaven. And he's saying, listen, we are entrusted with certain things. If you do nothing with what you're entrusted in, you are wicked and lazy, and what you have will be taken away from you. And again, first we need to acknowledge something. Not everyone in the story was given the same. Not everyone was equal, but it doesn't matter. And at no point did the person with 5 or at 1 looked up and said, well, he gave more than me. Well, like I could have done more if he gave more. Jesus doesn't give any credence to that idea. He said, listen, you didn't do anything with what you had. So you are lazy, and that has held you back from who you're supposed to be. It further outlines also that sin is not dependent on the circumstances of our surroundings. It doesn't matter what people are doing. If we are doing nothing, then we are being slothful. It doesn't matter if the world around us is also taking a break. It doesn't matter what our circumstances are. Slothful is an attitude that we can find ourselves in. If we are not investing what God has given us properly, and we're going to get to what that is in a moment, it's still sin. Sin does not depend on the circumstances of our surroundings. Sin depends on the posture of our heart. And then it says the person that does nothing with what they were given, so what they started with was taken away from them. Like, that's crazy if you think about it. The person that did nothing with what they were given had it taken away from them. That's heavy, but if we're lazy with the gifts and opportunities that God has given us, did you know that he can actually take them away and give them to someone else? Am I talking about God's going to remove your talent like a Space Jam ball? Maybe not. But it's actually a biblical principle that if we are not making use of the things that God has entrusted us with, that it makes sense that they will no longer be entrusted to us. Is that unfair? Well, it's only unfair if you're greedy, and we talked about that 2 weeks ago. Because we talked about everything we have has been given to us by God, right? We are just stewards of things. Nothing belongs to us. So as stewards, it's our job to multiply the investment that God has put in us. And what laziness and sloth does, it keeps us from doing that. And doesn't it make sense? If God comes back, like in the story, the master comes back, and he's one person has the ability to double my investment, and this person does nothing. Is it not a smart move to say, well, you're useless, so I'm going to have it, I'm going to give it to you? Right? It's uncomfortable when the rich person gets more, but that's Jesus' story there. And there's layers, don't unpack what I just said too much, but it's in the Bible. So then the question goes, so what has God given us, right? Like, is God literally giving us 10 bags of gold? What is all these things? What if I'm not as talented as someone else? What if I can't play guitar like Simon or that 11-year-old on Instagram? Maybe Simon was that 11-year-old on Instagram when he was 11. I'd believe it. He's pretty good. What has God given us? Listen, God has given us talents. God has given us resources. God has given us time. They say it all the time, right? Time is money. Man, when you say the word time is money, then look at this parable again. And if you want to get to the keys, and then we're going to call the band up in a little bit. If time is that important, what are we doing with the time that God has given us? Are we being honoring with that? Are we being good stewards of that, or are we being lazy? It's hard. It's difficult to think about because it requires effort, but then we get caught in that loop again because here's the scary part. Everyone in this room, I think, acknowledges that they could be a better person, they have a better relationship with God, they could be better at something, and their own laziness has held them back. Not their need for rest, but their own laziness has held them back. And I'm not saying we're all going to become these perfect robots of what perfect physical ability and mental ability is and limitless, like Bradley Cooper, that movie that came out. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but the truth is we can immediately identify it in our own lives. And then immediately say, oh, but it's hard, so I don't want to fix it. And it's the same thing that goes in that cycle over and over again. Like, honestly, think about your week. Think about your day. Think about how much more you could achieve if you actually focus. So, the crazy thing that's happened to us lately, we moved back into our offices, right? Literally every single person on staff is getting done 5 times as much work. Like, Bridget, am I wrong? We're getting way more work done. Why? Because now I'm sitting in my office, I'm focusing on work instead of being at home focusing on work. We're like, I've got a 4-month-old son. He's like, I'm like, oh, he's cute. I'm going to hang out with him. Oh, wow, that's been 2 hours, right? Or there's all these distractions. Think about your work day, though. Think about every single thing you do. How often are you actually deliberately focused on the task at hand? Or are we checking things? Are we slowing down? We've all had amazing work days, and we've gone home and thought, oh, what if that was my everyday? I'd be so much better at my job. I'd be way more productive. I'd make more money, or I'd make my boss more money, and he'd promote me, and all these things, and it'd feel great. But we don't do it. What about in our spiritual life, right? What if on a spiritual sense, like, yeah, oh, I could read my Bible. I could do all these things. But we don't. I don't have time. I used to do this with my leadership students when I was a youth pastor. Julian did this at least once. He's probably done it more than once. I don't know if he knows what I'm talking about. But so I used to run like a discipleship and leadership group, and it was like, I did this like Navy SEAL speech, and essentially I talked about the numbers of like what Navy SEALs are. Like, listen, if you attend church, you're like your regular soldier. If you want to come to this DL group, you're the Navy SEAls. You're the next level. So there will be a lot asked from you. There'll be a lot required of you. And I said, and the first homework assignment, do you remember what the first homework assignment was? That's okay, it was a long time ago. It was like 5 years ago for him, right? I asked every single one of my students, I'm like, track everything you do for a week down to the half hour. Without a doubt, track it, write it down. And with one exception, his name's Mark, we love Mark, every single student that I had at least 25 hours of unaccounted for time. So not sleep time, not Netflix time, not anything, just unaccounted for time. And I'm not saying that's for all of you because I know a lot of us work and a lot of us are busy, but at the same time, I'm willing to bet that if you actually looked at your time and you look back and you're like, okay, if I was my own manager looking to increase my productivity, and not just in a business sense, but in a spiritual sense, in a health sense, in a relational sense, what are we spending our time doing? Or are we just letting it pass by? Have we buried it in the backyard being like, oh, well, I hope it works. Like, did you know that you are alive today because God has invested time in you? Right? If we believe that God is sovereign over all things and that He created everything and that everything comes from Him, everything is a plan, that means the fact that you're alive and breathing means that God has invested interest in your existence. And if we are not using that invested interest in our existence, we are burying that in the backyard. Do we need to be perfect? No, but we need to try. Like, sometimes it's like terrifying to think about what sloth and laziness is called. Like, think of the things that never got done, the people that never achieved incredible things because they couldn't get off the couch. The disease is left uncured, the problem's not fixed because someone just didn't want to get up one day. Man, I hope that's not me. I hope I never stand before God being like, Ben, you were actually supposed to do this, 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 and this, but because you decided that this was more important, that's where you ended up. Oh, it's scary. why don't we put in the effort? Why are we so adverse? Well, there's one other big thing that I think is missed out on this last servant that we forget. The servant pretty much says, hey, I know you're a hard man. He says, I know that if I lost your money, you'd punish me for it. I'm actually willing to bet that he wouldn't have. I think he would have went, you know what? I only gave you a little bit for a reason. You tried. Let me help you again. Here's what I think can happen sometimes. We invest our time in things. We invest our energy. We invest our efforts into things, and we don't see the results that we want. We don't get a return on our investment. Maybe we invested. Maybe we found ourselves, our hearts are now hardened. Did you know that a hardened heart can actually sometimes look, sometimes we think it's anger, but sometimes it can actually be laziness. Because we've invested something somewhere, and we're like, I don't want to open myself up again. It's easier just to stay like this. I don't want to become vulnerable because it's easier for me to do this. I don't want to go through the effort required to change the things in my life because I'm comfortable where I am, even though the comfort is killing me. Even though that the spot that I'm at in my relationship with God hurts. Even though the spot that I'm in my relationships hurts, it's easier for me to do that than to put in the effort required to change. But what happens is, if we don't do that, we're not investing anything. We can't grow in this. Master looks at this guy and said, if you knew that I was difficult, like, why did you risk all that? But sometimes we can get worried that if we invest our time and our effort into anything, we won't see the results. Especially when it comes to our spiritual side, right? It's like, well, there's that fear that, like, what if can I be honest? This was me in high school. This is still me sometimes now. I preached a message during COVID called A Message to My Teenage Self. I had all my key leaders do it, and mine was the last one, and it centered around the idea of when I was in high school, I was so afraid of not being the absolute best at everything that I wouldn't try something unless I knew I'd be the best at it. Because I would rather have the idea in the back of my head going, oh, if I really tried, then I'd be the best. Oh, if I really gave 100%, then I'd see. But if I don't do that, I can use that as an excuse as to why someone's better than me, because they're putting 100% in and I'm only putting 50%. So the fact that I can keep up with them would show me that I'm really that good. But I was deep down scared and terrified that if I did put the full effort in, what if it was only 98% and I wasn't the best and I knew? And that would paralyze me from never achieving a lot of things. And there's things that I know in my life that I missed out on because I was too lazy to put in that whole bit of effort, and I was too afraid that I wouldn't reach that I'd be let down. You want to know something crazy? First of all, it's not a competition, especially when it comes to your relationship with God. The comparison game will kill you. Stop looking at other people's relationship with God. But also know this, that if you, it says in the Bible, it says in the book of James, if you draw near to God, He will draw near to you. If I can call the rest of the band up as well, as we're about to close. The truth is this. You cannot make a poor investment into your relationship with God. Maybe you've been burned on things, and maybe one of the things that motivates our laziness is because we've been hurt and we've been let down, and maybe we were the only person that worked in our group project in grade 7, and we showed up for the presentation and no one else had their part done, and our half of the diorama looked stupid on its own, so we vowed to ourselves that I'm never going to do that again. Oddly specific, I know. I was the kid that didn't do the work. Thanks, Sheldon. I appreciate the beat. Sheldon's not real. You get what I'm saying? We put ourselves out there. Let me just tell you this. Because if you missed everything I've said, like, this could be very easily misconstrued as a self-improvement, go to the gym, wake up early, macho Joe Rogan, eat elk meat sort of TED Talk. And you know what? That's probably not a bad thing. Just because something comes from a secular source doesn't mean it's bad. There's actually a lot of value in some of the things when self-improvement is like, yeah, wake up early, clean your room, take care of yourself. Those are good things to do. However, they're not gospel. And here's what the gospel is. The gospel is not dependent on us. It's dependent on God, which means that our effort and our investment in our time should actually be paid back to God. And if you invest your time and your effort and your energy into your relationship with God, that is an investment that will always return. We don't have to be afraid that if we step out and we put in that effort for the kingdom of God, that God won't have our back. Like we sang, and we're going to sing again, because He won't. He won't let us down. He says He'll never leave us or forsake us. Right? Sometimes that fear and sloth kind of come together where we're afraid to try something new. We're afraid to step out. We're afraid to do something that could be incredible, but we get paralyzed by it because we're afraid that God won't meet us there, but He